The Holy Gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ according to Matthew.
Glory to you, Lord Christ.
Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and undergo great suffering at the hands of the elders, and chief priests, and scribes, and be killed, and on the third day be raised. And Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him, saying, God forbid it, Lord. This must never happen to you. But he turned and said to Peter, Get behind me, Satan, you are a stumbling block to me, for you are setting your mind not on divine things, but on human things. Then Jesus told his disciples, If any want to become my followers, let them deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake will find it. For what will it profit them if they gain the whole world but forfeit their life? Or what will they give in return for their life? For the Son of Man is to come with angels in the glory of his Father, and then he will pay everyone for what they have done. Truly I tell you, there are some standing here who will not taste death before they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. The Gospel of our Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Christ.
I speak to the name of one God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Be seated. If you've ever read anything from Amy Jo Levine, who is a Jewish scholar, and she's written several books on both Christianity and Judaism. We studied her last year, both in her Advent and Lenten study. One of the things that she says is that when you read the Bible, whether you're just reading the Old Testament or the Bible in its entirety, both the Old and New Testament, when you read the Bible, it should elicit a range of all human emotions. There should be parts of the Bible that you just cannot figure out. You're completely confused by. There should be parts that make you sob because they are so devastating. And there should be parts that make you roll on the floor laughing because they are just so funny. For me, this reading is one that I always struggle to get through because I think it is just so funny. And the reason is because of the exchange between Jesus and Peter. And every time I read this story, I hear the exchange differently in my head, which I think is maybe how it went, and I'm going to share it with you. We just get through Jesus saying to his disciples, we heard this a couple weeks ago, he says to his disciples, Who do people say that the Son of Man is? And the disciples answered, some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, others still a prophet. And he says, and who do you say that I am? And Peter says, you're the Messiah, the Son of the living God. And Jesus says, you're right. Good job, Peter. You are the rock on which I will build my church. And then Jesus says, to be the Messiah means that I'm going to go to Jerusalem. I'm going to be handed over to the chief priests and the elders and the scribes. I'll be put on trial. I will be convicted, and I will be put to death. And Peter says to Jesus, he takes him aside, and he says, I don't know, Jesus. Sounds like a real bad idea. Let's not go to Jerusalem. Let's just stay here in Caesarea Philippi. Let's walk on water. Let's cross the Sea of Galilee a few more times. Let's just not go to the place where people want you dead. That's a choice. We don't have to go there, Jesus. And for me, this just makes total sense. Just don't go to Jerusalem. Peter makes complete sense here. It's a solid life plan. If staying alive is the goal, not going to the place where people want you killed, seems like a very reasonable thing to do. And Jesus, of course, we know how the story goes. It says, Peter, you're a stumbling block for me. Get behind me, Satan. You're setting your mind not on divine things, but on human things. So poor Peter, in the course of this kind of interaction with Jesus, which is spanned out in the lectionary cycle over a couple weeks, but in reality happens in one short conversation, Peter gets the answer correct. He's the rock on which Jesus is going to build his church, and then he's immediately a stumbling block and told to get behind him, Satan. He's kind of had the whole range of being in favor and then not getting it right in one breath. And the part of me that I like about this reading is one, because I think Peter is very rational. I think that's exactly how I would respond, and how I hope you would respond to me if I say, hey, I've got this crazy idea, we should do this as a church. And you guys say, I don't know, Mary, it's maybe not the best idea. Let's talk that through more. I think it is very rational. But the other part about this reading that is true is that while it is rational, it is also the safe choice. And Peter wants to make the safe choice. I want Peter to make the safe choice. I want to go back. And if you've ever watched The Chosen, which is the dramatic retelling of Jesus, you kind of want to sometimes scream at the screen and say, just don't do it. Just don't do it. Just stay. Just stay where you are and be safe. And Jesus, of course, is the Messiah, and the Messiah has a job to do. And that is to go to Jerusalem and be handed over to the elders and the chief priests and the scribes and be put on trial and be killed. And Jesus is going to do that because that is what the Messiah does. It's not the safe thing to do, but it is the thing that Jesus does. He will lay down his life for us. We know how the story ends. We know that that's what Jesus is going to do. We know why Jesus does it. We understand where the plot of the story is going. We know what the outcome is. And we get to stand here 2,000 years later really thankful that Jesus didn't take the easy way out. They didn't listen to Peter and listen to the safety of what Peter was suggesting. But he went ahead and went through with the plans. But the other part of this is it reminds us that faith isn't always safe. Jesus continues to say that if you want to be my followers, if you want to be my true disciples, you need to take up your cross and follow me. And that's a phrase that we use regularly in our world today. But in Jesus' time, taking up your cross was taking up a literal piece of wood that Jesus would eventually be crucified on. It was to take up something that the Roman Empire used to put people to death and follow Jesus. He is saying that if you want to be my disciples, you will have to lay down your life. It will cost you your life. It will cost you everything. And that is a really high price to pay. Sometimes when we talk about faith, we talk about what's called the life cycle of faith. And people have done a lot of research on what is the life cycle of faith. And the thing is if you kind of do a big circle, the life cycle of faith kind of goes something like this, according to research. I didn't make it up. This is according to research. Research says that the life cycle of faith starts with what they call an inquirer, someone who is interested, someone who is willing to maybe come to church, maybe just talk to somebody that they know is a Christian. They have some questions, and they're ready to hear your answer. They're ready to come and learn a little bit more about it. And then if that part goes well, if they hear answers that make sense to them, or even if they don't hear answers that make sense to them, that they have a place in which they can ask those questions, and they're still engaged, they'll remain in that. And then they become a little bit more involved in the faith cycle. They become a little bit more involved in church. Maybe they stay for coffee hour. Maybe these are people who've never stayed for coffee hour, and all of a sudden they start to stay. Maybe they sign up for things. Maybe they join the choir, or they offer to read in church, or they offer to bring the elements forward. Maybe they become a little bit more involved. They're not going to become on vestry yet. They're not ready to do big commitments in the church. They're ready to do slightly smaller commitments in the church. And then what happens is a crisis of faith. You kind of are at the top part of the circle here if you started at the bottom. Which I guess the circle doesn't have a technical bottom, but in my picture, the circle starts here and we're about here. You have a crisis of faith. And the crisis of faith is individual, and the person gets to define what their crisis of faith is. And it can be something that is relatively small, and I hope for all of you it is something relatively small for you. Maybe I say something in a sermon that just doesn't sit right. You read something in a newspaper or an article, or you read a part of the Bible and it just doesn't sit right, and you don't know what to do with it. And you start questioning everything about your faith. Maybe it is as simple as learning that there are two creation stories in the Bible, one right after the other. Maybe that's your crisis of faith. For others, their crisis of faith is much more profound and traumatic. Maybe it's the loss of a child or a loved one. Maybe it's something awful and traumatic that has happened to them. Something that throws their entire view of God and the world into chaos, and they're trying to make sense of it. And here at that point in the crisis of faith, there are three ways that people can go according to research. The first is that the church responds to them in a gentle, loving way. But they cannot reconcile what happened in their life and God, and they leave the church. And when they are asked, what religion, what church do you attend on Sunday morning, they answer with the word none, N-O-N-E. And they're described as the nuns, N-O-N-E, the nuns. I don't go to church, none. And those people will come back to church if the right programming is offered, if the right conditions are met. They will come back to church given a certain amount of time. Then there are people who the church didn't respond to as well. Maybe they told them, your doubt in faith has no room in this church. You either sign up or you get out. Maybe the church itself has caused the crisis of faith and doesn't respond in a gentle, loving way. And those people, again, leave the church. But when asked, where do you go on a Sunday morning for church, they respond with, I'm done with church. I'm done. And research shows that people who respond by saying, I am done with church, they mean it. They are not coming back. It does not matter what programming you have. It does not matter how great of a preacher you have. It does not matter what you offer them. They're done with church. They will not step back foot into a church door. Maybe years will pass and they will change denominations, but most of the time they will never re-enter a church building. And then the third option are people who have a crisis of faith. Their faith communities respond in a way that is gentle and loving, and they are able to come to some sort of resolution between where God and this crisis of faith exists. And they dive deeper into faith. And they become what is called in this cycle of faith. They become people who have a mature faith. People whose faith has been tested and tried and reconciled. And they understand that what it means to be a Christian means that you are not protected from all harm or dangers of this world, but that Jesus will be alongside you even in your crises. So what does this all mean for us today? How does this reading kind of play into our lives today? Well, first and foremost, if you are coming into a crisis of faith, people can go through the life cycles of faith several times in their life. We all know that just because you have one crisis of faith doesn't mean you're immune to having them for the rest of your life. However, I wish I could tell you that it did. If you are coming into a crisis of faith, please know that as a faith community, we want to respond to you in a way that is gentle and kind and helpful and loving. And we hope that we can do that for you. But the second part is that if you are not in a crisis of faith, the other big thing that happens in those moments is that the community of believers becomes incredibly important to the individual person that is in crisis. Their faith community plays a huge role on whether or not they will leave church for good or whether or not they will have mature faith. We do faith in community. There's a reason we gather for communal worship on Sunday mornings. But the other part that Jesus told us is that if any of you want to be my disciples, you have to take up your cross and follow me. You have to lay down your life for others. You have to deny yourself. And the only reason it is safe to do that, the only reason we can do that in a Christian community is because we are all called to do that. I am called to deny myself for you, and you are called to deny yourself for me. There is protection in denying yourself because your faith community should also deny themselves to take care of you. We take care of one another depending on who has the need. I've said before, and I will reiterate again, if you research the bubonic plague, you will find that Christians survived Black Death at higher rates than any other people. Because what happened is that when people were sick, Christian communities came and brought food and water to people who had the bubonic plague. And because they were given nutrients, they survived at greater rates. We now know that nutrients and feeding your body when you're sick plays a direct role in how quickly you recover. We know that from science now. They didn't in that time, they just thought they were being hospitable. The point is they denied themselves. They put themselves in risk of getting sick to take care of one another, knowing that if they got sick, their Christian community would do the same. But the other part of this is it reminds us that we don't always get to be safe. We don't always get to stay in Caesarea of Philippi. We don't always get to not go to Jerusalem. Sometimes we have to take the hard path and follow where God is leading us, even when the more rational idea is to just stay put. We're celebrating 125 years as a church. We're going to have a big dinner. You're going to hear about it in announcements. You hear about it in your midweek announcements. Hopefully everyone knows about it. We're celebrating 125 years as a church. For 125 years we have existed in this community, and at the dinner you will hear about the entire history of this church. But the question for us now is, where are we called to go for the next 125 years? And I'm a little bit like Peter, I would like to think. I like to think that I would want to be a little rational and say, let's just calm down and stay put and not take the scary way. Let's just do what is gentle and safe. But Jesus reminds us that that is not where we are called to be. Sometimes we are called to go into the daring unknown, or maybe even the known dangers of the world. We are called to go out of our comfort zone and be with the people there.